There's this new video by Vadi Vidya, but it's 40 minutes long. But I fucking love Elden Ring, so I kind of want to check out the lore.
So the gameplay trailer for the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC just dropped, and it's also extremely story-heavy.
Pure and radiant, he wields love to
Yes,
strive
bro, you
clean
should buy
the
this
hearts
game.
of men.
And this is very much the story of Miquella. Let's learn what we can.
This is the best
There is
game ever.
nothing more terrifying.
You'll recognize Miquella's cocoon here. It's located in Mogwin Palace, and that is the DLC access point that will give way to this. What they're calling the Land of Shadow, a place that you can explore on June 21st as long as you've defeated Moog and Radahn. According to Miyazaki, the DLC is at least the same size as Limgrave in the base game, and this will be their largest DLC to date.
In that forsaken place.
Oh, you have to kill Radahn and Moog first to get the DLC area.
Blood of your fellows. They are too
Okay.
faithful.
Interviews also reveal that there will be 8 new weapon categories and at least 10 new bosses.
They were never saints. They just happened to be on the losing side of a war.
Enemies here
hold
are the Vestiges.
Hold up. This guy said, Viv seeing Elden Ring's lore, I want to learn this, Viv, when other games show their lore, fuck this. It's because this game is actually good. That's the difference. That's the difference. This game is actually good. Bro, I'm not going to sit here and look up Fall Guys lore. I'm not going to sit here and look up, I don't know, what's another game that's like popular? Fortnite lore. I don't care about these games, bro. And those games, it's like, bro, who cares? But this game is actually good. Watch a map path theory.
Of a war that occurred in the Land of Shadow.
Hour 30-minute
long ago.
long lethal.
They've just been
Jesus.
obscured by the Erdtree until now. So many feature designs that would be considered cursed or blasphemous in the lands between.
Yeah, this boss looks crazy.
There's no better example of that than the newest member of Marika's family, Messmer.
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft?
God, he
of
looks so
life?
cool.
We're entering the DLC as a Tarnished that was sanctioned to become Elden Lord, but it seems events in the base game might pale in comparison to what's playing out here with Miquella, who arrived long before we did.
I presume you, too, are keen to know. Just
Bro, the
what
trailer
kind
is
of
so
Miquella
good.
So let's talk about everything. I have analyzed every frame, translated every interview, and kind of haven't slept in 2 days, so good night, and I hope you enjoy.
Those stripped of the grace
That
of
looks sick
gold
too. I think
shadow
that's got to be a boss.
in the embrace of Messmer's flame.
Come now, touch the withered arm, and travel to the realm of shadow. I will not be far behind. May we meet again.
I wonder how they make this game, like how they play
Before we
test the
break down
bosses.
story, I'm going to highlight what I think are 3 of the biggest gameplay details that I found hidden in some translated interviews. First, Elden Ring's DLC will actually feature a new power scaling feature that will come into play while you're in the Land of Shadow. Here, our character will be able to upgrade their attack power in a way that is separate from your rune level. Let me explain that. So,
Oh,
Miyazaki
shit.
mentions that this system is somewhat similar to how attack power works in Sekiro. In Sekiro, you don't level attributes
This game is
to
really
do
good
more
too, by the way.
damage like you would do in Elden Ring. Instead, your attack power can be raised by defeating certain bosses and
You can play this game on
claiming
console,
their
man.
memories. So, a system
Oh,
like this
man.
is being added to Elden Ring, and it will be a new way to get stronger in the DLC, in addition to using runes to level up, as you're used to. The reason this is being added is because From Software know that there are a lot of players who will be going into the DLC at high levels with their completed characters. And so instead of having players with completed characters just steamrolling the content, they want players to have that classic experience.
Okay.
Struggling against bosses.
I was thinking about this. when the DLC drops, should I play it on my level 300 character that has like everything unlocked? I probably should. Because I was thinking about that. I was like, man, my character is going to be really high level. I don't know if I want to play it on that. But maybe that would be fun. I don't know. Level 1 character? Hell no. Come on, bro.
And
Really?
needing to explore other areas to
Yeah,
get
level 1
stronger
character.
and to try again. So, by adding a new attack power resource, and hopefully also by scaling our characters appropriately, I think this idea could be genius. And it's especially important for a game like Elden Ring to have this, because this game will live or die by the enormous,
Yeah, I'm gonna replay the whole
expansive
game
world
for
it
sure.
has, and you need to want or need to explore that world. Next, of course the DLC will be getting many new weapons, but most interesting is that these new weapons span 8 new weapon categories. Elden Ring already had a ton of weapon types, so
Yeah.
getting 8 more
Ash of War,
is actually kind of
Incantations.
insane. So far we know 6 of these new categories. One is the dueling shield, which combines offense and defense. Another are these reverse grip swords that we see being wielded in this clip. And then there's weapons that enable a martial arts style, reminiscent of the Dragon Bone Fist from Dark Souls 2, or the Senpo monks from Sekiro. Miyazaki also mentions a large Japanese sword and a new large sword.
This boss right here has got to be the new
He
Millennia.
also mentions a
This one right here. They said, I actually watched one of the interviews. I saw it on Twitter, and they said they're gonna have a boss in the DLC that's like Millennia, and this has got to be it.
large Japanese sword.
'Cause that is crazy.
And a new large sword. Whatever
I'm gonna buy this game when I get my paycheck and stream it. Yeah, man. Dude, the game's awesome, bro. You'll
that
love it.
means. But personally, I'm most excited for these. These are equipable throwing weapons where all of your melee attacks are thrown attacks. Elden Ring always had really smooth ranged gameplay, but the weapons were so bad that it just wasn't worth playing, so I really hope these are viable. Anyway, the third gameplay point I want to mention is that, again, Miyazaki says that the DLC area should be at least the same size as Limgrave. But you need to bear in mind, this is coming from the same humble man who told everyone that Elden Ring would take about 30 hours to complete. So I wouldn't be surprised if Miyazaki is underselling
Oh,
the size
shit,
of the DLC
dude.
here, if anything.
That's true.
That's enough about gameplay for now. Let's talk lore. Shortly after the DLC trailer released, I received an email from Namco Bandai about it, and they included this short poem. It reads, "The Land of Shadow, a place obscured by the Erdtree, where the goddess Marika first set foot, a land purged in an unsung battle, set ablaze by Messmer's flame. It was to this land that Miquella departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage, of all things
Yeah,
golden.
true, bro. This game is
And
beautiful.
now Miquella awaits the
It's
return
so good
of
looking.
his
Like all the
promised
areas.
Let's break that down, starting with the Land of Shadow. According to interviews
God,
with
should we play some of
Miyazaki,
it after this?
the Land of Shadow is a place that has become physically
Dude, there's just so many fucking areas in this game. Like, yeah, Limgrave. What's the area right next to Limgrave? I forget, the red area. And then you have Lakes of Liurnia, the capital, and then eventually Ashen Capital. Then you have like the Deep Root Caves, like the bottom areas. Yeah, Moog's area, the blood. Oh,
with
man.
Miyazaki,
It's
the
so beautiful.
Land of Shadow is a place that has become physically disconnected from the Lands Between. So this isn't an alternate version of the Lands Between.
Yeah, the tree is the
nor does it
capital.
seem like we'll be going backwards or forwards in time to access the DLC for once. And that is refreshing.
Elden Ring's
compared
like $60
to
bucks.
Past From Software DLCs. I am excited for a DLC that will expand on the present world for once, rather than a past or future world. That said, if anything, the Land of Shadow will definitely contain many remnants of the past, as it is
That boss is so
a place
cool.
obscured by the Erdtree, where the goddess Marika first set foot. If this place can be obscured simply because the Erdtree exists, then I lean towards thinking that this might have always been some sort of shadowy dimension, rather than once physically being a part of the lands between landmass, although there is a nicely sized gap right in the middle of the lands between where this might fit. But I think the Erdtree does generate a ton of light, so the idea of a land of shadow being obscured by the Erdtree kind of makes a lot of sense. As for why this place became obscured by the Erdtree, I think we can lay the blame squarely at the feet of Marika, since the age of the Erdtree is her age, after all, and
Is it
this age
mandatory?
only came about when she ascended to
By the
godhood
DLC?
and became the vessel.
I mean,
of the
DLC doesn't
Elden
come out till
Ring.
June. So, I mean,
The
you can make
biggest
that decision
part
for yourself, you
that's
know, if you like the
always
game
been
or not.
missing from Marika's story is what happened before she became a god. And the shadow of the Erdtree seems to hide the answers to that exact question.
I don't even know how
Since
much the
the
DLC is
poem
going to be.
calls the Land of Shadow the place where the goddess Marika first set foot. Marika setting foot in this place before setting foot in the lands between makes a lot of sense, because we've always known that Marika isn't from the lands between. She's a part of the Newman race.
Yeah.
And the Newman
Yeah,
are
the
said
DLC
to
that
have
comes out in
come
June
from
is the first
outside the lands between.
one. I don't know
The character
if there's going to be
creator
more in the
calls
future,
the
but
Newman supposed descendants of denizens of another world. So either this other world is the Land of Shadow, and Marika originates from there, or Marika comes from somewhere outside the lands between and outside the Land of Shadow.
how big is it? Oh, bro, you guys. Okay, I got to play this game. We're playing this game after I finish this video. Guys, the game is so big. It is not 30 hours to beat it. Are you fucking kidding me, dude? It took me 120 hours in game time to beat it. 120 hours. I didn't even finish everything. I didn't even do like 100% completion. I didn't kill every boss. I didn't get every weapon. I didn't find every secret. First playthrough, 120 hours. It is huge. It is huge. You'll never play. You see a game like this that's $60 for this much content, and you will look at every other game like this will ruin gaming for you in a way, because you'll look at every other game and be like, wow, $60 for this, like the new Call of Duty. Like, it is huge, dude.
But simply set foot in the Land of Shadow before venturing to the lands between. Either interpretation could be true at this point, I think. At any rate, it seems like the Land of Shadows is extremely important to Marika's past. Miyazaki drops a huge detail on that note, stating that the Land of Shadows is the place where Marika became a god, and the Golden Tree was born. I can't wait for the DLC to elaborate on those circumstances. When Marika did claim the Elden Ring, her most significant act was removing the Rune of Death from it. Afterwards, many previous cultures of death were rendered obsolete, as souls were now supposed to return to the Erdtree. So, if souls started to return to the Erdtree, where they were presumably reborn, where were souls going before that? Now, this is just speculation, but is it possible souls once went to the Land of Shadow? Could the Land of Shadow once have been a sort of
You made an
afterlife?
edit?
As evidence for this claim, consider that A. Miquella
I hope that
only
big thing is
managed
not a
to
boss, by the
depart
way.
to the Land of Shadow when he divested himself of his grace and his flesh, so his death led to him being here. Next, trailer dialogue explains that those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame. So those who are stripped of the grace of gold have to meet death in this place. And the last bit of evidence for this speculation is that there already is a shadowy realm of death alluded to in Elden Ring lore, called the Helfen. So, since we know that the Erdtree...
They say the game's only 60 gigabytes. That's another thing. It's like super well optimized for how much content is in it. But how many bosses do you think the DLC will have? They said at least 10.
disrupted the previous cycles of death in the lands between, It definitely makes sense to me that the Erdtree might obscure the Land of Shadow beyond just being a bright source of light. It might have replaced its existence as a sort of afterlife, but I could definitely be wrong on the afterlife stuff, so let me know what you think. At any rate, the Land
Star
of
Wars?
Shadow has
Oh
now
my
become
God.
relevant again, for the Tarnished have found a way to enter this forsaken place. The poem goes on to read, "A land purged in an unsung battle, set ablaze by Messmer's flame." I interpret this as the land was purged in an unsung battle, and then it was set ablaze by Messmer's flame. These seem to be two separate things. So first, let's talk about the war, the unsung battle. In an interview, Miyazaki references the war when he was asked about this Wicker Man enemy, and replies, "So this giant basket of flame was a terrible, gruesome weapon used in a war that occurred in the
It's
Land
not
of Shadow.
60
The
terabytes.
kindling that you see is actually the remains of bodies that were put in there to burn. As for whose enemies were put inside the Wicker Man, I'd wager that it was Marika's enemies, since she's the one who came out victorious as a god, and with the golden tree as well. Just speculation though. Zully the Witch points out that the Wicker Man traces its origins back to Celtic myth, where people were allegedly sacrificed within a Wicker statue, and many other users have pointed out that this design may have instead been drawn from Berserk.
That is sick.
They were never saints. They just happened to be on the losing side of a war.
If you look closely, you can actually see a mane of red hair attached around a face on the Wicker Man's upper thighs. Red hair like this
Oh,
is
God.
referenced in the giant's red
This is the
braid,
worst boss
which
ever.
reads, "Every giant is red of hair," and Radigan was said to have despised his own red locks. Perhaps that was a curse of their kind. Incidentally, the red hair here is just one of many symbols in the trailer that are considered blasphemous over in the lands
I
between.
really like this boss
Omen
design.
horns, for example, are another such symbol of despised beings under the Golden Order, and Omen horns are seen here on the Wicker Man, here upon the Lion Dancer, here on these enemies, and even upon the roaring Rune Bear thing, which also has that red hair. And then there's this hippo thing that's using an aspect of the Crucible, which were also aspects that became despised and scorned. And then there's a spirit wielding the Iron Cleaver that's the signature weapon of the Misbegotten.
You
who
can
were
make
also
it is multiplayer,
despised.
but it's not
So,
the best
lots of
multiplayer
blasphemous
experience.
symbols going
You can make Elden Ring way better multiplayer experience with a mod. There's a really good mod for it.
on, but no character in the DLC has as many of them as Messmer, who is the character that is at the heart of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, maybe even more so than Miquella. This is the demigod who would set ablaze the Land of Shadow.
Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction?
Okay, what the fuck does that mean? Mother, wouldst thou truly lordship sanction? That's just a bunch of gibberish, bro. Like, honestly, what the fuck does that even mean?
Wouldst thou truly lordship sanction?
Like, what?
One so bereft of light.
Fuck is that? What?
So this is Messmer, and the mother he mentions is Queen Marika. An official interview makes this quite clear. To quote Miyazaki, "And you may have seen at the end of the trailer,
I was just yapping.
there was this piece of key art where it shows Messmer sat in this throne-like chair, and people who've played the game
Yeah, it
may
was-
recognize this throne
It's
to
Elden
be
throne.
one of those from the boss room where you battle Morgoth.
Yeah.
And this represents the thrones at the base of the Erdtree. And it's supposed to symbolize that Messmer stands on equal footing to these other demigods and children of Marika who sat around in these thrones and held the rooms of the Erdtree. So he is an important figure who rivals these other demigods. And as you play the DLC, you will learn a little about why he wasn't featured in the Legends of the Erdtree, the Lands Between. You'll realize why he exists in this shadow, this Land of Shadow. As to who Messmer's father is, well, there are many signs that they're a product of Radagon. For one, there's the red hair, and then there's the fact that Messmer's name starts with M, which suits the
Yeah.
naming convention for the children of
America,
Radagon,
Miquella, Moog.
who are Miquella, Melania, and possibly Melina. Speaking of Melina, we've talked many times about the butterfly theory, which posits that all children of Radagon America have a butterfly of their own. Miquella's is the nascent butterfly, Melania's is the Aeonian butterfly, and since Melina is the kindling maiden, we've long speculated that hers was the smouldering butterfly, but now it seems that butterfly could belong to Messmer instead, given his much more overt flame symbolism. That said, there is a fourth pink butterfly featured in the trailer now, so it's possible the butterfly theory might still have wings. If
Really?
Messmer was legitimately born alongside the other children of Marika Radagon, that actually places his existence a little bit later in the timeline, still in the age of the Erdtree, but after Radagon left Renala for Marika. Whatever the case,
Dude, what is
Messmer
up with
would
the
find-
names in this game, by the way? It's like America, Miquella, Melania, Melina, and then for the R's you have, what are all the names for the R's? It's like Radagon, Radon. It's like, what are these names, bro?
himself
Radagon,
in the land of
Radon.
shadow, delivering death
There's
to
another one.
those stripped of the grace of gold.
Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame.
Since this line
Holy.
is delivered by a third party, it seems there's a common belief here that Messmer's role is to deliver death to those stripped of grace who find themselves in the land of shadow, including, apparently, our Tarnished, who finds themselves at odds with Messmer.
W, Lusa.
Mother,
Wouldst thou truly lordship sanction
in one
so bereft
bereft
of light?
In this dialogue, I think Messmer is questioning why Marika has seen fit to restore grace to the Tarnished and sanction their lordship, guiding them to become Elden Lord, even though in his eyes we are bereft of light. Messmer strikes me as a bit of a rebel and an outcast. He's not what you'd expect
attack is
from someone
crazy.
who is clearly killing people who have been stripped of the grace of gold. But I do ultimately think that he holds Marika in high regard. I do think he's doing this on her
Shut
behalf.
up, bro.
The fact that he sits on a demigod's throne might be evidence
Damn.
enough, but in an excellent bit of
Bro, I'm not
photo
gonna carry you
manipulation
through the
by
game, man.
user
Come on,
Wusa69 on Reddit, we can clearly spy a statue of what seems to be Marika in the background. It has her signature braid and her armband as well, and uniquely, she's holding a baby who could be Messmer, but that's just speculation. We know Marika uses people, even her enemies, even the blasphemous. She will
Bro,
keep a fire
it'll take you
giant
like 10
alive
hours
just
to get
so
to the
it
first
can
boss.
watch over something for eternity. She will disguise herself as Radagon, make her biggest rival fall in love with him, and then abandon that rival and undo them from within. She will condemn the misbegotten and then get one of them to craft weapons for a Tarnished so that they can become Elden Lord. So in a similar way, I feel like Messmer being useful to Marika, despite very clearly being a blasphemous character, really isn't that strange. But what do I mean about Messmer being blasphemous? Well, first, there's the snakes. According to the Gravekeeper cloak, the snake is viewed as a traitor to the Erdtree, and Now we
Yeah, exactly what Vic said. There's a guy on a horse at the beginning. Yeah, Luso, you're gonna learn very quickly that some enemies, even though you see them at the start of the game, you're gonna learn very quickly that those are enemies to come back to at a later point when you're strong.
don't know if they're talking about Messmer's snake or the Great Serpent, which is what we assumed before. Whatever the case, there's no way that Messmer's snakes would be looked upon favorably by the Golden Order. In the Erdtree Colosseums, for example, the audience delighted in seeing the bronze snakes on the armor of the gladiators be beaten and battered. And then there's Messmer's usage of flame. According to the Spark aromatic, fire was prohibited to those who served the Erdtree. And while this rule was forgotten as the war drew ever on,
reels.
I do think Messmer might have some links to
Hollow
the flame
Knight's
of the
so
Fell
good.
God, if I had to guess. He's got the red hair, and snakes do appear on the Giant's Flame Forge in the mountaintops, but I'll admit these connections are pretty shaky. We don't know exactly what kind of flame Messmer is using just yet. Lastly, Messmer clearly has a connection to Dragon Communion, which is also something that's frowned upon. Dragon Communion is the abhorrent act of consuming the hearts of dragons to commune with the ancient dragons.
Based people
and
did this, by the way.
become more like them. According to the Magma Worm's Scale Sword, Dragon Communion is a grave transgression for which many partakers were cursed
Magma
to crawl
Worm.
on their bellies as shadows of their former selves. As evidence for Messmer's communion, his one good eye is yellow and slitted, which is a clear symptom of consuming the dragon hearts that even our Tarnished gets afflicted with. And, not to mention, his winged armor looks a lot like the Drake Knight set, which is a set that labels the Drake Knights as partakers of communion. Then there's this
Dude,
symbol
yeah,
on the
when
box
are they gonna
art,
drop
and
Silk Song?
even the fire he conjures.
They said they were gonna
that
do that last year. They
looks
never
a little
did.
bit like the Dragon Communion seal, but it's not a one-to-one match. And then serpents themselves are considered imperfect dragons, in Dark Souls lore, at least. And Messmer's serpents are sprouting.
I just realized my
draconic
monitor
wings,
isn't showing the
so
top part.
there could be something there. On this promotional page, we also learn that Messmer's full title is Messmer the Impaler. And it could be that this name simply comes from his fighting style, but I will also point out, as many others have already,
No,
that there
not
is a
2 more
catacomb
years.
in the Lands Between called the Impaler's Catacombs. So it's possible he got this reputation from certain deeds that he committed in the Lands Between. Of all the characters I can think of, only the Fire Giants and Marika come to mind as
Fire
ever
Giants.
being impaled. The Fire Giants' stakes aren't
What if we get a
identical to
Godskin
Messmer's
trio?
spear, but they are similar. And Marika being impaled at the end of the game never really had a good explanation, so maybe this is a chance for them to explain that, finally. So, in conclusion, I get the vibe that Messmer is this rebellious, kind of blasphemous child, but that they're still loyal and, more importantly, still useful to their mother, who is Marika. Though, of course, all my opinions and speculations in this video, especially, are very subject to change. Next, let's talk about Miquella. Miquella is many things. He is the demigod son of Queen Marika and her consort Radagon. He is Miquella the Nascent, cursed with eternal youth.
thought Miquella was a
He
girl.
is Miquella the Unalloyed, who sought to find a cure for his sister's scarlet rot. He is Saint Trina, an alter ego who deals in sleep and dreams. And he is Miquella of the Halig Tree,
Yeah.
a sort of Erdtree that he eventually embedded himself within. He's also the subject of an hour-long lore video on my channel, and I'm also going to be talking about him again later this week in a lore video about Moog, so please forgive me for being brief in my description of him here. Suffice to say though, Miquella is a very important demigod. He's also an Empyrean, which
Is
means
Miquella a femboy?
he is a rare character eligible to become a god. and succeed Queen Marika. Additionally, his sister says that he is the most fearsome Empyrean of all, and that he possesses the wisdom, the allure of a god. It's this allure that has led to his fate in the base game, which is to say, he appears to be dead at the hands of Mohg, who is Miquella's demigod half-brother.
He's just sleeping.
Mohg ripped Miquella's cocoon out of the Halig tree and abducted him. Now Miquella's cocooned flesh lies in Mohgwyn Palace, and his withered arm there will become the entrance to the DLC. Miyazaki elaborates on this point, stating that Miquella has traveled to the Land of Shadow for his own reasons, and it's up to the player to follow in his footsteps, as many other NPCs also have before you. The poem reads, "It was to this land that Miquella departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage, of all things golden." The fact that Miquella has divested himself of his flesh reminds me a lot of Rani, who slays her own flesh intentionally in order to free her from the control of the two fingers. Through his own death, it seems, he has departed to the Land of Shadow, though now he is without his strength. He's also likely divested himself from his great rune, which is probably this one, seen here, which takes the same shape as this emote you get for pre-ordering, which is called Ring of Miquella. So all of this should explain why he needs you. The poem continues, and now Miquella awaits the return of his promised lord. If I had to guess where we're ultimately headed, it would be the castle here, right beneath the shadow of the Erdtree. Here, an ark is catching the bounty of the Erdtree, just like the rune arcs do, and the sky above is enwreathed by these ethereal cloth tapestries. According to Miyazaki, these tapestries are
so
a
cool.
veil, and they are a symbol of the Land of Shadows being hidden from the world outside. And speaking of veils, the Black Knives are assassins that are invisible due to their concealing veils, and we have a talisman that is a part of those veils, put together from dark cloth with a lustrous sheen that completely hides the wearer's presence. Earlier, we talked about how Marika was likely responsible for the Land of Shadow being concealed or veiled, and according to the Black Knife armor, the Black Knives are rumored to be Numen who had close ties with Marika herself. So maybe we're already starting to understand
I have that
the
armor on one of
nature
my
of
characters.
this veil. That said, the way this veil is laid
Yeah, sure, I'll
brings
watch
to
it.
mind a lot of things. At first it reminded me of Marika's bedchambers. Then I thought maybe it could represent Mohg's bloody bedchamber, as he puts it. Or it could even represent the baldachins of the deathbed companions, which, according to the baldachin's blessings, are hidden temples in the guise of a bedchamber. This could represent Miquella's long-awaited rebirth, or maybe his eternal nascence. It could even represent the fact that he is Saint Trina, an alter ego that has to do with sleep and dreams. So many things. Speaking of Saint Trina, though, there's a brief shot of a masked character who looks like they're sleeping in a purple swamp. The droopy flowers in the background might be Saint Trina's lilies, and the purple haze of this swampy area definitely gives off sleep effect vibes. You might recall, when Rani first meets with you in Elden Ring, she does so amidst a mist, which has put Kale and his donkey to sleep nearby.
Oh shit.
And the more I think about it, the more I think this encounter might have to do with Miquella. In this moment, Rani gives you the spirit calling bell and 3 wolves, which she says are from Torrent's former master. And considering we see what looks to be Miquella riding Torrent here in the Land of Shadow, I think we can reason that Torrent is Miquella's steed, and thus that Miquella has given you gifts via Rani and favored you ever since the very beginning of the game. But the rabbit hole goes deeper, because Melina is the one who gives you Torrent's whistle at the start of the game. And since we've now learned that Torrent
Bro,
was
this is
likely
crazy.
in the Land of Shadow with Miquella, does that mean that Melina would have ventured to the Land of Shadow to retrieve Torrent from Miquella at some point? Remember, Melina's origins are largely unresolved in Elden Ring, so I really hope we learn more about her story in this place. The fact that she might have traveled to a land that's enwreathed in Messmer's flame might also explain why she's burned and bodiless, but now I'm just engaging in unhinged speculation, and these theories might have
This
gotten out
cutscene
of
is so
hand.
cool.
But let me do unhinged speculation on one more thing, and I want to draw your attention to the fact that we've learned that it's necessary to kill Radahn to access the DLC. That's curious. It seems to hint that his death is essential for events in the Land of Shadow to make sense. Logically, this would be related to the meteor shower that happens after you kill him, right? Because it's in this moment that the fate in the night sky is suddenly let free. Perhaps Melania was even chasing this world state where fate is freed from the night sky, and maybe she was sent here to kill Radahn
Bro,
on
what's so
behalf
cool
of
about
Miquella
this game
when
is,
she
like,
fought him.
there's so much stuff in this game that you just would never see if you just played the game to beat it. And that's so crazy. Like, there's so many areas, so many enemies, so many, like, boss fights. And you just would never see them.
All those years ago. What's crazy is we still don't know why Melania fought Radahn, so hopefully we get an answer for that as well. And of course, most of you won't have to worry about killing Radahn, as your characters are likely already at the end of the story. And speaking of the end of the story, Miyazaki's recent interview reveals that they don't currently have plans to make a second DLC for Elden Ring, so whatever
Yeah,
ending
I
that's
saw that.
coming with Miquella might be the final one. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's shaping up to be a good ending with Miquella.
Pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the hearts of men. There is nothing more terrifying.
To shrive is to hear confession, to assign penance and absolve someone. Sounds like a pretty harrowing process.
This guy's got an ASMR
and
voice.
that is a perfect match for Miquella, who is described as both benevolent and fearsome. This is that ominous love of Miquella, which is a really unique vibe, and I'm very excited to see where things will go. Believe it or not, I've still got a lot of the trailer to break down, but first, I'd like to finally reveal this.
Nope.
So,
I bought
and even
30 of them already.
go, since there's a lot I couldn't quite fit into the previous parts of the video. First, this is my favorite enemy design in the trailer. Its body is actually made
Same.
up of 3 or 4 robed humanoid beings, and they're all coordinating together to puppeteer this beast, just like the traditional lion dances from Chinese culture. It's amazingly inspired. According to Miyazaki, there was a culture that existed before the Golden Tree, and the lion dancer is derived from that culture. Next up, this character who sits alone in a room filled with debris. Quailag over on YouTube has acutely noted that they look very much like the scholar who appears upon the carrion inverted statue, which is a
What
key
the
item
hell?
given to you by Rani during her questline. The area they appear in seems to also feature the many bird cages of Raya Lucaria, so it's exciting to see that we might be learning more about some of the glintstone sorcerers. Next, this character wears the deep navy hood of expatriated royalty, and the hood was gifted to those who saw the guidance of grace, who then departed on missions to faraway lands, from which they would never return. They cast a completely new spell type and in the background we see lion statues with omen horns.
The imps.
The fact that these lions with omen horns are venerated might suggest that this was from a time when horns were seen as signifiers of the divine,
God, that's an
not
ugly
symbols
creature.
of ill omen. Also, I was so excited to see this player cast these golden wings. We have many aspects of the Crucible spells, but we could never cast the wings, which until this point were only able to be utilized by the Crucible Knights. And I don't think that's the only new Crucible spell we're getting access to. A new screenshot shows the Tarnished using
That's so
these
cool.
golden porcupine spines, the same ones
Same ones that the
utilized
hippo.
by this deformed hippo enemy after it charges, and the sound it makes is just like a Crucible spell. But I wonder if this pot thrown by the player character is a spell or a consumable or a weapon art. And speaking of new screenshots, I want to know the story behind this guy. I will protect him with my life. It seems like he appears in this same field of blue flowers, which, if you look carefully, has that grave that has a hole in it that you find in Morn's castle. There's also, of course, this
I don't remember that.
dancer character. There are a couple of dancer characters in Elden Ring, so maybe she's related to that. Oh, and I
Melania.
also adore the design on this guy who is attempting this in
Yeah, this is fucking crazy. This is crazy to look at. He's like taking this thing out of his head, and it's like a sword rib cage, and it's poking out of the sides of him.
possible task of wrenching a sort of spinal golden rib cage through a hole in his skull. Interested to see what happens after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going out of his face too.
And if you look closely at his robes, you'll notice he's actually the same character as the man in this portrait at another point in the trailer. So there's clearly a story here, especially if they're worthy of a portrait, right? Next to this man is a woman who looks a little bit like a deathbed companion. The origins of the deathbed companions were alluded to in the base game, so it seems kind of fitting that we might explore those origins further in the Land of Shadow, but who knows. I also wonder if this enemy could be a Knight of Radahn. They use gravitational magic, as a lot of his knights do. They're also armored somewhat similarly, and they ride a boar, and Radahn's helmet
definitely.
has boar-like tusks, so that might be a thing. But there's just too much to speculate over. Could this armor be related to the Knight's Cavalry? This Twitter user points out that Messmer's statue looks a lot like the pose of the Cleanrot Knight. Is there a reason for that? Could these black knights with gold trim be related to Malekith? Are the people who are wearing masks part of House Mirai? Why is the top of this castle blackened and disintegrating into the sky? Why is there a line of birds standing before you in this swamp? Is this character afflicted by frenzy? Are they a worm face? Their posture is kind of similar. Are we getting Runebear communion spells? And
Definitely.
a huge question, why does Messmer only have one functioning eye? So many
like
questions, but I
Melina.
guess it'll have to wait. Subscribe for more Elden Ring lore in
Wow,
the coming weeks.
this guy's sucking off.
And
Wow.
subscribe to keep up with all the biggest news regarding the DLC. Thank you to Miss Pep.
All right, guys. Now we're gonna watch this hour. No, Jesus. No, that was crazy though. That's a good video, man. That's a good video. The lion-headed human legs are goofy. It's a spell, so whenever you kill like a boss, I'm assuming it's a boss. Whenever you kill a boss in this game, you can either get the weapon that they wielded, like you can get that boss's weapon, or you can get like some sort of sorcery. And I'm assuming that thing with the head is the sorcery, so the player can use the rune bear sorcery and act as if it's the rune bear. Looks pretty cool. But yeah. Okay.